Picture this. You're setting up your flight management computer, FMC, for an arrival into a challenging airport. You open the approach page and you see two options that are almost identical. The RNAV Yankee and the RNAV Zulu, to the exact same runway. They use the same runway, the same primary GPS guidance and often share the same final approach course, so why do they both exist? Is it just administrative clutter, or is there a critical difference that could completely change how you fly your aircraft? Today we are demystifying the instrument approach suffix. We'll look at the database limitations that force this design, how to choose the right one in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and a real-world airliner incident where picking the wrong letter led to disaster. To this new Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z series video. Today we arrived at the letter Y from Yankee, and that's also why we're discussing RNAV Yankee approaches. Let's dive in. To understand these suffixes, we have to look at the rules set by aviation authorities like the FAA and ICAO. When multiple straight-in approaches of the exact same guidance type serve as a single runway, designers use a single letter suffix to differentiate them. And they do this using a very specific split alphabet rule. The tail end, Z to S, those are straight-in approaches which are using letters starting from the end of the alphabet moving backward. So Zulu, Yankee, X-ray and so on. Zulu is always the first one published, followed by Yankee if a secondary version is needed. The front end, A to E, if you see letters from the beginning of the alphabet like a VOR A or RNAV B, these indicate circling only procedures that don't align with a straight-in landing. By the way, if you ever notice an airport that has a Zulu and a Yankee approach but is missing an X-ray, that's completely normal. If an older version of an approach is retired or updated, that letter suffix is permanently retired to prevent database confusion. But why do we need two different versions of a straight-in approach anyway? The primary reason is actually rooted in the limitations of airborne navigation databases, governed by a global standard called ARINC 424. Each flight management systems and GPS units have a hard-coded limit. They could only support one unique approach type to a given runway at a time. Storing two completely distinct procedures under the same name, RNAV runway 13 for example, would crash the system. To fix this, the ARINC 424 standard allows a single letter to modify the database file name, turning them into two distinct selectable digital paths, like R13 Charlie Yankee and R13 Charlie Zulu. The second reason comes down to what equipment your aircraft actually has. A standard RNAV GPS Zulu approach might use standard GPS tracking available to almost any aircraft, but an RNAV RMP Yankee approach might acquire RNP AR, which stands for Authorization Required. These advanced procedures require specialized airline certification, dual FMS hardware, and are famous for utilizing curves, radius to fix, RF lags, to weave perfectly through mountainous terrain or busy airspace. The third major driver is terrain and performance. At airports surrounded by mountains like Yakima, Washington, the Zulu approach might offer incredibly low landing minimums. But there's a catch. To use those low minimums, the aircraft must be capable of a steep, non-standard missed-approach climb gradient, like 250 feet per nautical mile, to clear the mountains if you go around. If your aircraft is heavy or low performance and can't climb that fast, you are forced to fly the Yankee approach instead. It features a standard climb gradient but penalizes you with a much higher minimum descent altitude. So let's look at how this looks in the simulator. First we're gonna look at the typical general aviation glass cockpit using the Garmin G1000 NXI. As you can see, we plan a very short flight. We're not going to do the flight itself, but just to show you how you can program it, to St. Petersburg Clearwater International, Kilo Papa India Echo. And I can open the EFB and then you can search for the airport, right? I already did it, but I will remove it and then search again for you to show you how this works. And then you can go to, in this case, the maps. In the maps, I can see that there are multiple RNAVs approaches for, I would say, almost every runway. So that's good. So let's jump inside the aircraft and let me show you how you can program your flight, or at least your arrival in this case. So we're inside the Cessna 172, and when I press the FPL button, I can see that the flight plan is already there. It's bringing us to the airport. But what if I would like to add an approach? I can do that by pressing the proc button, which opens the procedures. And you can see that the right option is already selected. If not, you can use this large knob to move around and then hit the enter key, which brings up the approaches for this airport. In this case, you can see ILS approaches, the RNAV GPS, the 4 DMEs, and also the 404 and the 4B. Remember that one? We discussed it earlier in the video. So I'm going to use the large knob to, for example, select RNAV GPS 18 LPV. And then I will have a lot of transitions. You can either use the vectors, you can use also the IAFs, right? The initial approach fixes. Which is a designated geographical point in the terminal area of an airport where an aircraft begins its final approach to landing. Then we've got PIE, right? Papa India Echo, and then we've got another IAF. Well, in this case I'm going to select vectors because that's fine for me. And then you will see that it will say allow me to configure the minimums. That's recommended to do because you can use it in your, as a navigation system. In my case, I will leave it as is. And then I can see the beacons, the nav weights, which I need to follow. Once you've done that, you can either press load or you can say activate. If you press activate, it will load it and activate it. In my case, I want to load them. And then you can see that it has added the approach, in this case, to my flight plan. And that's how easy it is. Now let's have a look at another airport and another aircraft. But in this case with an airliner, the Boeing 737 MAX. So I'm going to open the EFB, then search for the airport, just to make sure that there's an RNAV available. I press it, I select the runway, and then I will see multiple RNAVs are there. So that's good. So let's go inside the cockpit and then, let's say, try out if we can program the RNAV approach. So we're inside the cockpit of the Boeing 737 MAX. So let's look at how we can program the approach. What you need to do is press departure arrival, then you select the arrival, and then you see a long list. You can see the ILSs, you can see the stars, and using the next page you can navigate your way. Here you can see the RNAV Yankee and the RNAV Zulu. So let's assume that we are assigned this one. We're pressing this one, the RNAV Yankee 8 Lima. Then we can select the transition or the stars, right? So transition in this case. And then press execute. What then will happen is that it will be added to the flight plan, as you can see, and this is how you can program your flight in the airliner, in this case the Boeing 737 MAX. But as an airline pilot, your choice depends of course heavily on the air traffic control instructions and airport constraints. If the HC clears you for an RMP approach with curved arcs, you'll select the Yankee file. If it's a standard linear GPS entry, you select Zulu. Once clicked, you must execute the change and cross-verify on your navigation display that the correct path geometry has been loaded without breaks. Because in some cases what you will see is that it will not load correctly, so let me have a look at that. Here you can see the flight path, and in some scenarios you might want to zoom out a bit and make sure that it's correctly set. If you see the route discontinuity, you might, I would say, experience some weird issues. There is a trick, and that's to delete the previous waypoint, although there are a lot of discussions if you should do this, yes or no. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Now let's return to a real world danger which occurred in real life with a Southwest aircraft. To prove this isn't just academic theory, let's look at what happened to Southwest Airlines flight 1919 at Chicago Midway. Due to intense airspace congestion and low weather visibility, air traffic control informed the crew that only arrivals capable of executing the specialized RNAV RMP Yankee approach to the runway 13 Charlie would be acceptable. This specific approach uses curved RF legs to precisely skirt around traffic from nearby O'Hara Airport. However, during a high workload phase of flight, the crew made a critical mistake. They accidentally loaded and briefed the standard RNAV GPS Z approach instead of the required Yankee approach. Because the two approaches use completely different waypoint sequences and altitudes, the FMS routing suddenly didn't match the air traffic control clearance. Realizing the error late into their descent, the captain attempted to reprogram the FMS while flying through the clouds. This late state change caused several cognitive tunneling on the flight deck. Rushing to stabilize the aircraft, the crew completely forgot to perform their standard landing checklist, and crucially, they failed to arm the automatic speed brakes. When the Boeing 737 touched down on the wet, snow-contaminated runway, the speed brakes failed to deploy automatically. This cut their braking effectiveness by a staggering 60%. By the time the crew manually applied full braking and reverse thrust, they run out of tarmac and overrun the runway. The NTSB directly cited that late-stage FMS reprogramming as a primary root cause. So how do you apply this to your own flights in Microsoft Flight Simulator? Before you blindly select an approach page, remember the Suffix rules. Check the chart notes. Look at the equipment and climb requirements box. If it requires a RFLAC or RMP-AR authorization, make sure your sim aircraft and your flight path supports it. Look at the minimums. If you don't have WAAS or vertical guidance, look for the approach that offers step-down fixes, often the Yankee version, to get yourself lower and safer. Avoid late changes. If ATC changes your approach late, pause or take your time to systematically load, verify and rerun your checklist. Understanding these subtle chart details is exactly what separates a casual simmer from a true flight deck pro. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button for more deep dive aviation tutorials and let me know in the comments below, have you ever accidentally loaded the wrong approach suffix in your simulator? Here ends the episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z. Keep an eye on my channel because there will be a poll to let you choose the last letter of the alphabet, the letter Z. Thanks for watching again and hope to see you back next week.